Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. It's really great to see such a full crowd. Sorry we lost our colleagues online. Thank you also, Austis, for the kind introduction. My name is Caroline Mathisen, and I am the head of EEA Legal Coordination at the EFTA Secretariat. And today I will give you an introduction to a very important topic that also has already been alluded to by several of the speakers this morning, namely how EU law becomes EEA law. And this process is at the heart of what we do here at the EFTA Secretariat in Brussels. And it also forms the basis of the work that the other institutions, the two that will follow me right after me now, this morning. So, but before I start, I actually am really curious. How many people are attending this seminar for the first time? Can you have a show of hands? Whew, almost everyone. Fantastic. And how many of you will attend a breakout session this afternoon? Excellent. Well, because I want to take the opportunity to say that my presentation this morning is just an introduction to the topic. And those of you who will attend breakout sessions have the chance to join a very good one with two of my colleagues who will dive deeper into the topics that I'm talking about today. Okay, so much for the marketing. So this introduction, I will focus on three main points. First of all, well, these points will give you, I hope, a basic understanding of what we call the EEA incorporation process. And even if you don't have the opportunity to join the breakout session, I hope you will have a good overview of this process after my presentation. And the first of the 3 points I will talk about is a defining feature of the EEA agreement, namely that it is dynamic. I think that word has also been used earlier today, but I will go a bit more deeper into what it actually means. And secondly, I will take you through the step-by-step process of incorporating EU acts into the EEA agreement. And finally, I will show you some tools that are helpful to navigate the admittedly rather complex world of EEA law. Okay, to start, the EEA agreement is dynamic. What does that actually mean? Well, others have mentioned a lot this morning that the main objective of the EEA agreement is to extend the internal market to cover the European Economic Area. And what is the internal market? Also been mentioned today. A basic feature are the 4 freedoms: free movement of goods, of services, capital, and persons. Before I talk more about 4 freedoms, though, I will take you on a small detour. You may have guessed, if nothing else from my job title, that I'm a lawyer. And when I studied law in Norway too many years ago, there was a course early on in my studies that was called EEA law. And I found it a bit confusing at first, but kind of caught on to the subject after a while. And we learned a lot about the 4 freedoms and the internal market, and this is kind of the area of law that I have pursued ever since. So when I graduated from law school, I landed my first job, which was as a junior professional at the EFTA Surveillance Authority here in Brussels, which was a really good first job. And among other things, I was assigned to work a lot on food and veterinary law. And one of my very first cases concerned a notification from Norway about national derogations under the circus animal regulation. Now, I can tell you, they didn't teach the circus animal regulation in law school in Norway. So I quickly came to realize that the 4 freedoms are, of course, just the starting point for the internal market. That the 4 freedoms are supplemented and completed by, a huge amount of so-called secondary legislation, usually directives and regulations. And as I learned, even the animal health requirements for animals in traveling circuses is in fact regulated by EU law. And under the EEA agreement, all of this legislation that regulates aspects of the internal market is relevant and applicable. And here I will just make a small remark about the scope of the EEA agreement, which was also mentioned by a previous speaker. I have focused on the 4 freedoms and the internal market, and that is because EU legislation about other topics, about other policies, are not EEA relevant, as we say. For example, that was already mentioned, agriculture policy, fisheries policy is not part of the EEA agreement. Same goes for the customs union, the trade policy, justice and home affairs, and other areas. So focus is on internal market legislation. As you've also heard today, and you can see on all our banners around the room, the EEA agreement is celebrating its 30-year anniversary this year. In those 30 years, there has been a huge development of legislation. Marit had the numbers on her slide. I'll just repeat the main ones. At the time it was signed, there were about 1,800, so 1,800 legal acts that were part of the EEA agreement. And today we have roughly a little more than 8,000 that are in force. And of course, that doesn't really cover all the legal acts that have been adopted, entered into force, and then been repealed again over the course of those 30 years, which number around 15,000 in total. So all of this continuous development needs to be made part of the EEA agreement. And that takes me to the last word on the slide, which is homogeneity, one of our EEA buzzwords, also already mentioned today, and you'll probably hear it more. So what does homogeneity mean? Well, homogeneity is about ensuring that the same rules and conditions apply across the internal market. And for this to work in the EEA, the EU legislation has to be made part of the EEA agreement. And if not, the internal market would quickly become fragmented and unable to fulfill its function. So this brings me to the next point on my presentation, which, well, now you should probably have, I hope, an understanding of this dynamic nature of the agreement and why it is necessary to turn EU law into EEA law. And I will now show you a short little video that we have made, which explains step by step the process of doing this incorporation. Okay, that's a pity. I will ask my colleagues in the breakout session to show you the video because it's actually a really good one. It talks about, I'll mention the highlights, how proposals on the EU side are processed by our EFTA bodies, all the institutions that have been shown on the slide, how the drafting of the joint committee decisions, making them part of the agreement, is done, how there's an exchange with our EU partners to agree on the text, and how that finally enters into force both at the international level but also domestically in our EEA states. Well, I'm going to save some time then if I don't do the video, because then I will skip then to my final point, which is the EEA tools. And this is a screenshot of our website. It's www.efta.int. And I would encourage you to browse the website. There's a lot of interesting information in it. But for today, I will show you just two things. They can be found at the very top banner on the website, marked in a red arrow on the slide. The first is EEA-Lex, and the second is the EFTA Toolbox. And to start with EEA-Lex, which is on the left of the slide. EEA-Lex is a searchable database. You should have seen on the, on the video, but the point is that EU law is not automatically part of the agreement. There is a process to make it so. There are several steps that the EU Act needs to go through to get to the point where it becomes part of the EEA agreement. And in this database, you can search for a specific legal act, and you will see where in the process that act actually is. And once the act has been made part of the EEA agreement, you will find, among other things, the text of the EEA Joint Committee decision, for example, and you can also see the date of entry into force on this web page. And on the screen, I put just as an example the General Data Protection Regulation, or the GDPR, which you can see from the timeline is in force, incorporated into the EEA and currently in force. Then on the right-hand side, I have put up the EFTA Toolbox. And here I also just want to highlight 2 points this morning. First is at the top there, how EU law becomes EEA law, which is a familiar thing now. Clicking on that will take you to our web tool. And this tool explains, both in simple terms and in more detail if you're interested, the incorporation process. The tool is available in all the EFTA languages, so German, Icelandic, and Norwegian, as well as English, of course. And you can also look up information, for example, of how the process works in the individual EFTA states, if that is of interest to you. And the video that I was supposed to show you is also available on that page. And then finally, the second tool that I will just highlight this morning, and I think you can find it interesting, is the How to Read EEA Law, third on the list there. This is another tool. It explains the EEA adaptations. I think these were mentioned by other speakers. These are the adjustments that we make to make the Act fit into the EEA agreement. This tool is very interesting. It has a lot of interactive options that you can try out to see how this all comes together. So I recommend you to try it out. Very good. Well, I'm running through my time, but to finish, I will just then mention once again that we have breakout sessions this afternoon. One of them will dive deeper into all the things that I mentioned. You will also get the chance, hopefully, to see that video that I promised. It's a very useful breakout session for practitioners and anyone who wants to learn more about the process. Thank you very much for your attention.